Willowdale, Texas, wasn't the kind of place where you locked your doors at night or pretended not to know your neighbor's middle name. It was a town where time moved slowly, comfortably, stubbornly slow. The kind of slow where the postman still walked his route and waved to every porch, where the bakery closed on Sundays, and where folks remembered who your daddy voted for in 1984. But somehow the biggest secret of all had managed to live there quietly. For more TH, Reese Granger was a man people trusted. A retired sheriff in his early 60s, widowed, well-respected, and well-worn in that Texas kind of way. He lived in the same modest white brick house he'd built with his late wife over 30 years ago. A porch swing creaked gently at the front, its slow, steady rhythm a reminder that life didn't always have to rush forward. Twice a month, like clockwork, he trimmed the hedges out front and waved to passing cars. People still honked. Reese was the type of man who wore flannel shirts in the winter, khaki shorts in the summer, and a sheriff's badge over his heart long after he turned his gun. He'd lost his wife to cancer 6 years earlier and never once complained about the loneliness. Instead, he read old Western novels, tended to a garden full of tomatoes and roses, and brewed his coffee black, always at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Most folks figured that's how he'd live out the rest of his years. Quietly, respectfully. And then came Marisol Vega. She arrived in town in the fall of 2011. Elegant, polite, with a kind of grace that didn't quite belong to the modern world. The kind that turned heads, not because of beauty, but because she moved like someone who had practiced staying invisible her whole life and only just now learned how to be seen. She rented a small blue cottage just 2 blocks off Main Street, gave private piano lessons, baked lemon scones that had the church ladies gossiping in awe. People asked where she was from. She said Virginia, then changed the subject. She wore floral dresses and vintage brooches, walked barefoot in her backyard just to feel the grass, and smiled in a way that felt like an apology and a blessing all at once. In a town like Willowdale, mystery was rare, and when it appeared, it usually came with suspicion. But not this time. Not with her. People liked Marisol. They said she had a heart for others. The pastor's wife called her a grace note in God's composition. That was more than enough. It was at a charity auction in early 2012 that Reese met her. She was donating 6 free piano lessons to raise funds for the high school's music program. Reese jokingly placed a bid. He won. He never did learn to play the piano, but he did learn that Marisol took her coffee with 2 sugars, no cream, that she hummed softly when she was nervous, that her laugh, when it came, was quick and surprising, like a door swinging open on a summer breeze. Their lessons turned into lunches. Lunches turned into long walks by the lake. And soon, Willowdale watched their relationship bloom with quiet curiosity, but no judgment. Reese had earned happiness, and Marisol, well, she seemed like a second chance wrapped in sunlight. They were married in the spring of 2013. The ceremony was held in the small town chapel, decorated with sunflowers, mason jars, and the warm hum of a gospel quartet. Reese wore his old sheriff's jacket, pressed and proud. Marisol wore ivory lace and a smile that seemed to melt even the coldest hearts in the pews. To outsiders, they looked like the kind of couple that gave people hope. To Reese, Marisol was air in his lungs again, after years of barely breathing. They settled into life together with quiet joy. Reese, now 59, spent his days reading, fixing the leaky faucet, mowing the lawn, and doting on his tomato vines like they were his children. Marisol continued teaching piano and started volunteering at the senior center. Their home was peaceful, full of slow dances in the kitchen and laughter that echoed off the wallpaper. There were no children between them. Reese had 2 grown daughters from his first marriage, Isabel and Riley, who lived out of state and visited less often than they promised. Marisol had once said, "Some people don't get that blessing. I'm one of them." Reese accepted that, just as he accepted her favorite lemon-scented lotion and her insistence on always folding laundry before sunset. People often said, if you don't believe in love after loss, just look at Reese and Marisol. And maybe that's why no one questioned too much. Maybe that's why no one noticed the silences that grew just a little too quiet. or the past that Marisol never spoke of, not even once. Because Willowdale may not have been a place for secrets, but for 10 long years, it had been home to one. And now, as the wind shifted through the hedges outside Reese Granger's home, a storm was beginning to build, one that would tear through everything they thought was true. In the months that followed their quiet spring wedding, Reese Granger found himself waking up with a kind of lightness he hadn't felt in years. For a man who had grown used to silence, the sound of another voice in the kitchen, the sight of 2 coffee cups instead of one, felt almost miraculous. The ache of losing his first wife never truly faded, but Marisol didn't try to replace that love. She honored it. She moved beside it gently, like someone walking through a room full of glass and light. Each morning, Reese sat by the kitchen window with his Western novel while Marisol prepared breakfast. Nothing fancy, scrambled eggs, toast, sometimes a slice of melon if it was in season. But every plate came with a folded napkin and a small note scribbled in her delicate handwriting. Don't forget to smile today. The tomatoes look jealous of you. You're more handsome than Clint Eastwood. Don't tell him I said that. Reese kept every note. They settled into a rhythm that only years of loneliness could teach someone to appreciate. Reese, now comfortably in his 60s, spent his afternoons tending the rose bushes in the front yard. Marisol taught piano lessons in the little music room they'd set up near the den. Sometimes, when the sun poured in just right, Reese would pause in the hallway just to listen to the slow scales, the laughter of children, and Marisol's voice, soft but steady, guiding them with grace. On Saturdays, they visited the farmer's market together. Reese would carry the basket. Marisol picked out honey, peaches, fresh thyme. At church on Sundays, they sat 3 rows from the front, holding hands during the hymns, heads bowed together during prayer. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. And after all Reese had been through, peace felt like a gift he didn't dare question. But life, even the gentlest kind, has a way of showing you its edges when you least expect it. Marisol had never been one to talk much about her past. When neighbors asked where she grew up, she'd say Virginia, and smile in that way she had, polite but final. There are no family photos on display, no stories about childhood, no high school yearbooks, no cousins calling from out of state. Just Marisol, her music, and a past that hovered just out of reach. At first, Reese didn't think much of it. Some people were private. He respected that. He had seen enough trauma in his years on the force to understand that not every past was worth revisiting. But now and then little things stuck with him, like how Marisol flinched slightly when someone knocked too hard on the door, or how she would excuse herself during conversations about family, claiming she had pies in the oven or students arriving early. She never spoke of dreams, not the kind people usually share in marriage. No talk of places she longed to see or old friends she wanted to reconnect with. It was as if her life had started the moment she stepped off the bus in Willowdale. And Reese, in his patient wisdom, had decided not to dig. But others noticed. Reese's daughters, Isabel and Riley, were kind enough when they visited, but never warm. Polite, distant, protective of their father in the subtle ways daughters often are. During Thanksgiving one year, Isabel had pulled Reese aside after dinner and asked quietly, "Are you sure she's who she says she is, Dad?" Reese had chuckled. "She's better than I deserve." But that night, in the quiet of their bedroom, he found himself lying awake while Marisol slept beside him, wondering what it meant to love someone you didn't fully know. Still, doubt never rooted itself deeply enough to change anything. Not yet, because when Marisol leaned her head on his shoulder during late-night movies, when she hummed to herself while folding his socks, when she brought him hot cocoa at 2 a.m. during one of his sleepless spells, Reese couldn't help but believe in the life they had built together. And Willowdale believed in them too. To the outside world, they were the picture of quiet redemption, a story people told at church potlucks and book clubs. If Reese Granger can find love again, there's hope for anyone. Marisol baked pies for fundraisers, helped decorate the chapel for Christmas, and hosted music recitals for her students twice a year. Reese read scripture at funerals and taught a self-defense class at the senior center. Together, they were woven into the fabric of the town, unassuming, respected, admired. But as the years passed, something subtle shifted. There was a certain kind of silence that began to creep in, not the warm, comfortable kind that comes from knowing someone deeply, but a different silence. The kind that builds when something unspoken grows too large to ignore. Reese began to notice how Marisol always changed the subject when he mentioned the future, trips, anniversaries, even planning the garden for next season. She'd smile, nod, but never commit. She started volunteering more, spending long hours away from home, always with an explanation, always with that same practiced ease. And late at night, after the lights were off and the house had settled into its creaks and sighs, Reese would sometimes lie awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead, and wonder why the peace he once cherished now felt so fragile. Still, he said nothing, because sometimes love isn't about having all the answers. Sometimes it's about holding on, even when the questions start whispering from the corners of the room. He believed in Marisol. He had to, until the day came when belief would no longer be enough. Long before Willowdale and wedding rings, before lemon scones and floral brooches, there was only a boy named Anthony Vega. He was born on a suffocating July morning in 1977 in Norfolk, Virginia. The hospital room was hot and stale, the blinds half closed against a world that already felt too heavy. His mother, a nurse's aide with trembling hands and tired eyes, held him in her arms and wept, not from joy, but from something deeper, something unspoken, a grief that had no name, only weight. Anthony's father never showed up, never signed a birth certificate, never asked to hold the baby. He vanished before the ink had dried on the admission forms. And so it began, a life built on absence. Their apartment smelled of bleach and cigarettes. His mother prayed loudly and drank harder. She clung to the Bible in one hand and a belt in the other. Most nights ended with slammed doors, muffled cries, and Anthony curled beneath his blanket, staring at the ceiling, trying to will himself into silence. "Why do you walk like that?" she would hiss. "Talk like that. Don't cry like some little girl." So he stopped crying. Then he stopped speaking altogether, at least when it felt too dangerous to say anything real. In school, Anthony faded into the back rows. He was the quiet one, the strange one. He kept his eyes low, his voice lower. He didn't go to prom. He didn't date. Instead, he buried himself in books, piano keys, and mirrors. Every night, he stood in front of the mirror and tried to smile. But not like himself. No, never like himself. He practiced smiling like someone else. Someone real. Someone the world might actually love. When he turned 19, he bought a Greyhound bus ticket with cash and left Virginia behind. He carried one suitcase and a name he was ready to bury. What followed were years that blurred together. Cheap motel rooms, overnight shifts in greasy kitchens, and shelters with flickering lights and broken locks. He drifted from state to state, always moving, never staying long enough to be seen. But every time someone called him sir, something inside him curled tighter. Shame, fear, exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from work but from hiding. Bathrooms became battlegrounds. Doctors' offices felt like ambushes. Every glance was a threat. Every word a risk. But he endured, not because he was brave, not because he was fearless, but because he had no other choice. In New Orleans, 2002, he met Calvin, a man with a poet's mouth and a liar's heart. Calvin ran a small cafe with dim lights and jazz in the background. He called Anthony dream-eyed. No one had ever said that before. It felt like a spell. For 6 months, they met in hidden places, back rooms, empty parks, rooftops where no one could see. Calvin taught Anthony how to roll his sleeves the right way, how to sip wine without shrinking, how to hold himself like he belonged. And for a while, Anthony believed he might be loved. But love, as he learned, wasn't safe. One night, Calvin disappeared. The cafe was dark, the door locked. When Anthony finally reached him by phone, Calvin's voice was ice. You knew what this was. Don't make it something it's not. And just like that, he was gone. Back to his wife in Houston. Wife. That word hit Anthony like a broken rib. Something inside him shattered that day. He stopped writing poems in the margins of napkins, stopped drawing futures in his notebook, stopped believing in the soft things. That was the first time he told himself, if they know who I really am, they'll leave. Or worse. So he stopped giving people the chance. Years passed in fragments. One job, one city, then another, until finally, after saving every penny and selling almost everything he owned, Anthony flew overseas. In a small clinic tucked away in Bangkok, Thailand, he stood in front of a mirror, bandages on his chest, hormone pills on the counter, and whispered to his reflection, "You made it." That day, Anthony Vega became Marisol, not overnight, not by magic, but by grit, by loss, by the quiet determination to survive in a world that didn't want to understand. She took voice lessons, learned to walk differently, dress differently, think differently, not for vanity, but for safety. Every small step was a revolution. The first time a stranger called her ma'am, she nearly cried. The first time she bought a dress that fit and didn't feel like a costume, she spun in the changing room like a child. The first time she walked down a street without shrinking, she felt her heart exhale. But no amount of hormones or surgery could erase the years of hiding, of apologizing, of carrying the fear that if anyone ever found out, it would all be taken away. So she learned how to be charming, gentle, graceful. She kept her past locked behind polite smiles and fresh-baked pastries. When she stepped off that bus in Willowdale in 2011, she wasn't just looking for a new home. She was looking for a quiet place to disappear. She found Reese Granger instead, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not entirely, not completely, but seen enough. He didn't ask about her past. He didn't pry. He brought her lemons from his tree and looked at her like she was something soft and sacred. She told herself it was okay, that it wasn't lying, it was protecting. But in protecting herself, she built a house on sand. And as the tide of truth began to rise, Marisol Vega had no idea just how quickly it could all be washed away. Reese Granger had always trusted his gut. You don't spend 28 years in law enforcement without learning how to read people. The way their eyes flicker when they lie, the moment their voice hesitates just a little too long, the subtle shift in body language when truth becomes uncomfortable. Even after retirement, those instincts didn't fade. He might have traded his badge for gardening gloves, but the part of him that could sniff out deception, that part never left. Still, love has a way of softening a man, of quieting that inner voice that once kept him alive in dark alleys and tense interrogations. And for nearly a decade, Reese chose to listen to his heart instead of that voice. He chose trust, chose peace, until the peace began to unravel. It started with the little things. Things no one else would notice, but Reese did. He noticed that Marisol never spoke about her parents. Not just vaguely, but with finality. If he asked, even gently, she'd smile and say, "They've been gone a long time." Then she'd change the subject. No photos, no stories, no childhood mementos tucked into drawers. Just a blank wall where a past should have been. At first, he told himself it was grief. Some people lock away their memories to keep from drowning in them. He respected that. He didn't push. But he noticed other things, too. She never went to the doctor. Not once. Reese, ever the man of routine, got his checkups like clockwork: blood pressure, cholesterol, prostate. He had a pill box labeled with the days of the week and a file folder in the office where every medical paper was neatly organized. But Marisol, she didn't even have a doctor's name on file. When he suggested getting flu shots together, she smiled, kissed his cheek, and said, "I hate clinics." That was it. End of discussion. And no matter how gently he brought it up, how much he tried to frame it as a couple's thing, she always deflected. Talked about her piano students, the neighbor's dog, the weather. Then there was the bedroom. Reese wasn't a young man anymore. He wasn't chasing fireworks. But still, there was something different. Marisol was affectionate, yes. Loving, yes. But always guarded. She kept the lights dim, undressed quickly, turned away. She was never fully bare, not under the light. And though she kissed him like he mattered, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. But he told himself it was his imagination. Because she loved him. She left handwritten notes in his lunch. She rubbed his knee when the arthritis flared. She baked his favorite pie even when she was tired. Love looked like that, didn't it? Then came the conversation that shook his certainty. It was a Thursday morning at the local diner, where the coffee was too weak, but the waitress still called him darlin'. Reese met his old partner, Harold Mitchell, there every other week. They'd sit at their usual booth and talk about old cases, grandkids, whatever came up. But that day, Harold stirred his coffee slower than usual. "So," Harold said, eyes on the window, "how's Marisol?" Reese smiled. "Same as always. Bakes too much. Talks too little." Harold didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "You ever wonder if maybe she talks too little for a reason?" Reese raised an eyebrow. "What are you getting at?" "I'm not getting at anything," Harold replied. "But something don't sit right. You were always the sharpest man I knew. Lately, you've been looking past things you never used to ignore." Reese tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out tight. "She's private." "So what?" Harold leaned in. "Private is one thing, Reese. But when someone shows up in a town like Willowdale and no one's ever met a single soul from their past, that ain't just privacy. That's isolation." He paused, then added softly, "You always told me there's no such thing as a harmless mystery." The words lingered. Reese went home that afternoon with a storm brewing in his chest. He tried to shake it off, tried to lose himself in pruning the roses, in washing the truck, in making tea the way Marisol liked it. But his hands were clumsy, his thoughts distracted. That night, while Marisol packed for a short trip to Austin, one of her rare visits to a college friend he'd never met, he watched her fold her floral dresses with the precision of a surgeon. She moved with practiced grace, slipping her navy blue coat into her duffel bag, brushing her fingers over the lemon-scented lotion she always packed. She kissed him goodbye like nothing was wrong. But something was. After she left, the house felt too quiet, too still. And that's when Reese went to the office. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to find old insurance records for a renewal form. But as he shuffled through the bottom drawer of the file cabinet, his fingers caught on something wedged in the very back. A small leather folio. It had been tucked so deeply, so precisely, it was clear someone hadn't wanted it to be found. He pulled out slowly. Dust clung to its edges. At first, he almost dismissed it, maybe something left behind by a previous tenant. But when he saw the name embossed faintly on the spine, he froze. Anthony J. Vega. Anthony. It didn't register right away. He stared at the name, heart thudding in his chest. Then his eyes fell to a small sticker on the bottom edge, one of those white office labels with a name written in careful, slanted cursive. The handwriting was unmistakable. Marisol's, his wife's. His throat went dry. The silence in the house grew louder, like something holding its breath. He sat down at the desk, slowly, and picked the lock on the folio with an old paper clip, an old habit from his days in evidence handling. The click was quiet, but it felt like thunder. Inside, neatly stacked and bound with a ribbon, was an envelope labeled Private Records. His hand trembled as he peeled it open, and what he saw inside would change everything. Reese Granger stared down at the contents of the envelope as if they might vanish if he blinked too hard. The first document was a birth certificate, issued in Norfolk, Virginia. The name at the top, Anthony Jerome Vega, born July 6, 1977. His breath caught. The next item, a U.S. passport. The photo showed someone younger, but familiar. Sharp cheekbones, eyes wide and searching. The name again, Anthony J. Vega. Sex male. Beneath that, Reese found a stack of legal paperwork. Official, notarized, undeniable. There were documents from a clinic in Bangkok, Thailand, dated 2005. Gender reassignment surgery. Hormone therapy schedules. A formal court order granting a legal name change. Anthony Jerome Vega to Marisol Elena Vega. Everything was meticulously preserved. Clean. Organized. And all of it hidden. Reese's hands trembled as he reached for the final few pages. A timeline of hormone therapy, prescriptions for estrogen, medical correspondence, and scanned receipts in Marisol's handwriting. It was her script. There was no mistaking it. The same one she used on grocery lists and birthday cards. The same soft curves and measured loops. He dropped the envelope. It fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird, papers spilling across the office carpet. The silence around him roared. He looked around at the room, at the lace curtain she had chosen, the lamp she always turned on at dusk, the family Bible she had carefully recovered for his birthday. It all felt suddenly foreign, like walking into a familiar house where the furniture had been rearranged by a stranger. The woman he had kissed goodnight for 10 years had once been a man. No, that wasn't quite right. She was a woman now. She had been, to everyone in Willowdale, for over a decade. But in Reese's deeply shaken mind, the truth tangled into something he couldn't make sense of. His heart raced. His thoughts spiraled. Was the marriage even real? Had he been lied to every single day? Had everyone else known? Laughed behind his back? Was he a fool? Or worse, the joke? The questions hit harder than any gunshot ever could. His mind replayed the moments that now felt drenched in falsehood. Their wedding. The first kiss. The anniversary when she baked him lemon pie and gave him a framed sketch of his late wife's garden. She had drawn it from memory, just from the stories he'd told. It had brought tears to his eyes then. Now he couldn't breathe. That night he didn't sleep. He lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, relentless circles. The wind outside whispered through the hedges like it carried secrets of its own. At 2:12 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Marisol. "Everything good, love?" His thumb hovered over the screen. Then, finally he typed, "Just missing you." She called a few minutes later. Her voice was calm, sweet like always. "I'll be home Friday," she said. "I can't wait," he replied. He meant it, but not for the reason she might have thought. The next morning, Reese woke before the sun. He brewed coffee like usual, but didn't drink it. He sat at the kitchen table, staring into the mug like it held some kind of answer. The walls of the house felt closer than usual. The photos of them together, smiling in front of the garden, dancing in the kitchen, now looked like props in someone else's play. He went back into the office. The envelope still lay open on the floor, its pages scattered like fragments of another life. But this time he noticed something else. Tucked in the back of the leather folio was a small object, flat, rectangular, and heavy with implication. A burner phone. Old, cheap, prepaid, dead battery. He plugged it into the charger and waited. When it powered on, a single thread of messages appeared on the screen. The contact name, Dr. V. Hale. Reese's stomach twisted. His thumb scrolled through the thread, each word tightening the knot in his chest. "Dr. V, do you have confirmation?" "Marisol, yes. This week. I'll handle my side. He won't know until it's done." "Dr. V, do you think he suspects?" "Marisol, not yet. But if he finds out, I'm done for." "Dr. V, after Texas, it's a clean slate. You deserve peace." "Marisol, I'm ready. I'm just scared." A few more messages followed, talk of bank transfers, insurance policies, and vague references to starting over and life after. Then one message that made Reese's blood run cold. "Dr. V, does he know about the policy?" "Marisol, no. He said he never signed it." "Dr. V, doesn't mean we can't use it." He stopped reading. His hands clenched into fists. Was she planning to leave him? Was this a setup? Was he just a tool? One last meal ticket before she vanished again under another name, in another quiet town? The house felt haunted now, not by ghosts, but by the weight of betrayal. But still, part of him hesitated. Because yes, there were lies. Big ones. Devastating ones. But there had also been kindness. Gentle, unforced love. Laughter. The way she'd held his hand when the doctor said the word biopsy. The way she played gospel hymns on rainy afternoons. The way she said, "Good night, darling," like it was a promise. Was all of that false? Or had she simply been terrified? Had she been trying to love him the only way she knew how? By hiding the part of herself that had always been punished? Reese didn't know, but he intended to find out. Because Marisol Vega, Anthony Vega, his wife, his partner, his mystery was coming home. And when she walked through that door, there would be no more silence. Only truth, one way or another. Friday evening arrived cloaked in a chill that Willowdale rarely knew. A low wind swept through the trees, rustling brittle leaves across the front lawn of Reese Granger's home. The porch swing, usually still and serene, creaked nervously in the breeze, as if it too sensed what was coming. Inside, the house was dim. Reese sat in his recliner, silent, unmoving. The television was on, but the volume low, casting flickering light across the living room walls like a distant fire. In his jacket pocket, the burner phone vibrated against his chest like a second heartbeat. His thoughts were a storm. He replayed the texts. He won't know until it's done. After Texas, it's a clean slate. The hidden documents, the false name, the hidden past. The woman he married, the woman he had loved deeply, was not who she claimed to be. But at the same time, she was. And that contradiction tore him in two. At exactly 8:14 p.m., he heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Marisol was home. Through the front window, her silhouette appeared behind the headlights. She stepped out slowly, wearing her navy coat, carrying the same floral duffel bag she always used. Her shoulders hunched slightly, her walk hesitant. As she approached the porch, the light above flickered, casting her in and out of shadow. The door opened with its familiar groan. "Reese." Her voice was soft, hopeful, tense. "You here?" He didn't answer. Not right away. She stepped fully inside, set the bag by the staircase, and closed the door gently behind her. "I came back because we need to talk," she said. Her voice cracked just slightly at the edges. Reese finally spoke, his voice low, ragged. "Yeah, we do." She turned and saw him, seated in the shadows. Her lips parted as if to speak again, but nothing came out. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, she walked to the couch across from him and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. The air between them buzzed with unsaid things. "I shouldn't have left like that," she began. "But I was scared." Reese's eyes never blinked. "Of me?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked down. "What were you doing in Austin?" he asked. His voice was sharper now. "Visiting a friend." "Don't lie to me." His tone turned steel. "Tell me the truth. All of it. Now." Her breath hitched. "You know," she whispered, "about my past. About who I used to be. I never meant to hide it forever. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" She swallowed hard. "Of losing you." Reese leaned forward, his voice rising. "The clinic. The burner phone. That message. He won't know until it's done." "What the hell does that mean?" Her eyes widened. "You went through my things?" "Answer the question." She shook her head. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was planning to leave quietly. I didn't know what else to do. You scare me, Reese. The way you looked at me after you found out, like I was something disgusting." His fists clenched. "You lied to me for 10 years. And I loved you every single day of those 10 years, she said, her voice trembling. That wasn't a lie. He stood now, towering, his chest rising and falling. So what was I? A cover story? A paycheck? Some dumb old man too blind to see the truth? No, she cried, standing too. You were my husband, the only safe place I ever had. But I had to protect myself. He began to pace, his breath uneven. You were never in danger from me. You hit me. He stopped dead. One time, she added, and you didn't even apologize. Silence. Reese looked at her like she was a stranger, like the woman who'd baked him cobbler and folded his socks was never real. You humiliated me, he muttered. Marisol's shoulders stiffened. You think I wanted this life? She snapped. You think I chose to be this way? I built myself from nothing. I survived things you couldn't imagine. I gave you 10 years of loyalty, of care, of love. And now you want to throw it all away because your pride can't handle the truth. Reese's voice turned icy. You disgust me. The words landed like a slap. Marisol flinched. Then her expression changed, softness gone, replaced by something sharper. Then why, she whispered, did you cry in my arms when your brother died? Why did you hold my hand during your biopsy? Why did you call me your miracle every Christmas? Reese stared at her. Because I didn't know what you were, he said. That broke something. She turned away, walking toward the kitchen. I wanted a future with you. I wanted peace. But now I see I was just your secret. Your pet. A thing you could love until it embarrassed you. Don't push me, he warned. She spun around. Or what? You'll hit me again. Don't. Go ahead, she said. Prove me right. He stormed forward, too fast, too close. She stepped back toward the kitchen drawers, her hand brushing the handle of the middle one. The one where Reese kept his father's old revolver. His eyes caught the movement. "Don't," he growled. Her gaze darted toward the drawer again. He lunged, grabbing her wrist. "You're not going anywhere. Let go of me. Not until you tell me who the hell Dr. V. Hale is. It's none of your business. I'm your husband." "No," she said, her voice firm now. "You were. Before you became someone I had to fear. Then chaos." She broke free. He reached for the drawer. She lunged. The struggle was clumsy, desperate. The sound of two people who once slow danced in the kitchen, now crashing through it like enemies in a battlefield. And then, bang. Silence. Reese staggered backward. A red bloom spread across his chest. His knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor. The revolver slipped from Marisol's trembling hands and clattered against the tiles. "Reese," she whispered, frozen in place. "Reese, no. I didn't mean to." She dropped to her knees, pressing her hands to the wound. Blood soaked her sleeves. "Please, please don't die. Don't leave me." Reese's lips parted. A gasp escaped, but no words. Just air. Then nothing. No breath. No movement. Just silence. With shaking fingers, Marisol reached for the phone. She dialed. The voice on the other end was calm. Robotic. 911. "What's your emergency?" Her voice cracked. I shot my husband." A sob tore through her throat. "I think he's dead." By sunrise, Willowdale was no longer the town where secrets stayed buried. Red and blue lights painted the quiet streets. Sheriff's cruisers lined the driveway of the Granger home, their engines idling like nervous sentinels. Neighbors stood at their windows in robes and pajamas. Some whispered behind curtains. Others watched openly, phones in hand. But no one spoke when Marisol Vega, clothes bloodstained, face pale, was led out of the house in handcuffs. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She walked as if the weight of the truth itself pressed against her shoulders. Inside the kitchen, Reese Granger's body lay beneath a white sheet, motionless. Blood had dried along the floor tiles in dull, brown streaks. The same tiles where they had once danced. The same tiles where he had once kissed her good morning. Now, they were a crime scene. At the county jail, Marisol sat in a gray-walled interrogation room. Her hands trembled. Her lips were cracked from the dry air. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. Her reflection in the one-way glass didn't look familiar. Not Anthony, not Marisol. Just a woman undone. When Detective Nina Delgado entered, she didn't bring intimidation. She brought presence. Calm, composed, razor-sharp behind kind eyes. She dropped a thick file onto the table and pulled out a chair. "Marisol Vega?" she asked. There was no answer. "Or should I call you Anthony?" A flicker of pain crossed Marisol's face. Then, softly, "Call me Marisol." Delgado nodded once. "Tell me what happened." Marisol looked down at her lap. Her fingers were streaked with dried blood. "He found out about my past. I didn't mean to keep it from him forever. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Her voice cracked. "Of being hated. Is that why you shot him?" "No," Marisol said quickly, shaking her head. "It wasn't like that. We were fighting." He grabbed for the drawer. I reached too. The gun just went off. "I didn't mean to," she swallowed hard. "I loved him." Detective Delgado pulled the burner phone from the evidence bag and placed it on the table. "He won't know until it's done," she read. "Do you have confirmation?" "I'm ready." "You sure those don't mean something more than leaving quietly?" Marisol flinched. "Those were about me leaving. I was scared, yes, but I wasn't planning anything violent." Delgado said nothing for a moment. Then, from a folder, she produced a life insurance policy. Recently updated. Beneficiary, Marisol Vega. Amount, $1 million. "Did you know about this?" "No, Marisol whispered." "He told me he never signed it." Delgado raised an eyebrow. "He didn't, but someone did, and handwriting analysis is already underway." And just like that, a case of tragedy became a case of motive. The trial began 2 months later. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters filed in alongside curious townsfolk, and those who had once shared baked goods and Bible verses with a woman now facing second-degree murder, fraudulent misrepresentation in marriage, and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Reese's daughters, Isabel and Riley, sat in the front row. Their faces were stone, their grief chiseled into silence. Marisol sat with her public defender, but not just any lawyer. Maya Trent, a fierce civil rights attorney from Austin who specialized in cases involving LGBTQ plus identity and gender-based violence. Her presence signaled that this trial wasn't just about what happened, but about why it happened. The prosecution painted Marisol as a master manipulator, a deceiver who built an entire marriage on lies, and when her secret came to light, chose violence to protect it. She pretended to be someone else, the district attorney told the jury. She married a man under false pretenses, and when the truth unraveled, she silenced him. Forever. When the DA played the 911 call, the entire courtroom fell into a hush. Marisol's voice, raw and frantic, filled the speakers. I shot my husband. I think he's dead. Please hurry. Some jurors looked away. Others closed their eyes. But Maya Trent stood calmly when it was her turn. What my client did was love, she said, slowly, clearly. For 10 years, she lived in fear. She lived in silence. And yet, she made a home. She cooked his meals. She held his hand through grief. She loved that man with everything she had, while always believing, deep down, that if he knew the truth, it would destroy her. The defense called a psychologist to the stand. She spoke of gender trauma, hypervigilance, and the deep-rooted survival instincts of those who had grown up being punished simply for existing. She spoke of shame, of how it carves into the soul like frostbite, of how people learn to hide just to breathe safely. She didn't kill him because of who he was, the psychologist said. She acted out of fear because of how he stopped seeing who she was. In the end, it came down to what the jury believed. Was it premeditated? Was it panic? Was it fear? Or was it guilt? After 3 days of deliberation, they returned. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The sentence, 6 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 3. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. A reporter shouted, "Do you feel justice was served?" Marisol paused. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "Justice," she said. "No. When the person you love dies at your hands, there is no justice. Only survival and regret." Prison did not look like punishment in the ways people imagined. It wasn't screams echoing through corridors or iron bars clanging shut in the night. For Marisol Vega, now officially inmate #54372B, it was something colder, quieter, more enduring. It was the same flickering fluorescent light above her bunk, the same cold oatmeal on a beige plastic tray each morning, the same hum of doors locking behind her every night at precisely 9 p.m. And every shadow cast by the gray-washed walls reminded her of one thing. She was no longer free. The media forgot her quickly. Willowdale moved on even faster. The porch swing at Reese Granger's house fell still. The hedges grew wild. A crooked realtor sign was the only thing left standing in the yard. Isabel and Riley never came back. Flowers appeared on Reese's grave once a year, always without a note. Inside the women's correctional facility, Marisol kept to herself. She folded laundry for the infirmary, worked in the library, ate alone. Her once curled hair hung in a plain ponytail. Her eyes no longer scanned for judgment. They simply stared ahead. Some inmates called her church lady. Others, less kindly, called her ghost girl. She didn't correct them. She didn't speak much at all. But one day, in the laundry room, a woman named Patrice, broad-shouldered, tough, with a long scar beneath her chin, watched the way Marisol folded towels. "You play piano or something?" Patrice asked, half suspicious. Marisol looked up, surprised. "I used to." Patrice nodded once. "Figures. Ain't no one folding corners like that unless they know rhythm." That was the closest thing to friendship Marisol would find for many months. Then came Officer Ramos, a young guard with tired eyes and too many shifts. One night, during head count, Marisol heard him humming softly. "Etta James?" she asked. He blinked. "You know it. I used to play it last for weddings. And funerals." He paused, then smiled sadly. "Well, I guess that fits here." In therapy group, she sat in silence for 6 weeks, listening to women speak of pain, of rage, of survival. Then, one afternoon, a young woman named Denise sobbed about how her father used to read her bedtime stories and then hit her with the same hands. The room was still. No one knew what to say. And then Marisol spoke. "He didn't love you less," she said softly. "He just never learned how to love himself without hurting someone else." The words were raw. They weren't polished, but they were real. And in that moment, the women in the room simply breathed together. Patrice reached over, squeezed her hand. "You ain't no ghost," she whispered. That night, Marisol slept for 4 hours straight. It was the first time she hadn't woken to the sound of a gunshot in her mind. 2 years later, she stood before the parole board. 3 strangers, a thick file, her fate in their hands. "Do you feel remorse for what happened?" one asked. Marisol didn't blink. "Yes," she said, "but not just for that night. I regret everything I never said before it." Another leaned forward. "If you could go back, what would you have said to him?" She took a long breath. "I would have told Reese the truth. From the beginning, I would have trusted that if he really loved me, he would have listened. And if he couldn't, at least I would have faced that with dignity." She paused. Silence doesn't protect love. It kills it slowly, and sometimes violently. There was silence. Then someone nodded. 6 weeks later, she was released on parole. She didn't return to Willowdale. She didn't dare. Instead, she took a bus to Asheville, North Carolina, under her new legal name, Anna Vega. She found work at a small nonprofit art center, teaching piano to underprivileged children. She rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and coffee every morning. No one knew who she had been. No one asked, and she didn't volunteer it. But she no longer flinched when people asked questions. She no longer feared the sound of her own name. She still had sorrow in her eyes, but now it had softened, like something acknowledged instead of hidden. Every day, she taught music to kids who had never touched a piano before. A little girl named Sienna once asked, "Miss Anna, why do you look sad when the music gets pretty?" Anna had smiled. "Some songs remember things for us." On Fridays, she brought cookies, store-bought, always soft. The children adored her. They gave her crayon drawings, cards with crooked hearts. She taped every one to her walls. She didn't date. She didn't try to. She wasn't running anymore, but she was still healing. On a rainy day in November, she visited Reese's grave for the first time in years. She left no flowers, only a folded wedding photo, faded and creased, but still intact. She stood for a long time in silence and whispered, "I loved you, and I was terrified of you. Both can be true." Then she turned and walked away. Nearly a year later, while browsing a used bookstore after piano lessons, she heard someone say her name. "Anna." She turned. Standing in the poetry section was Riley Granger. Her hair shorter now, flecks of gray, a blue cardigan, sharp, familiar eyes. Neither spoke for a moment. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Anna offered gently. "I know," Riley said. They stood there, surrounded by fiction and memoirs, breathing the same air. "I used to hate you," Riley said. Anna nodded. "Maybe part of you still does." "I don't forgive you," Riley continued. "But I don't want to carry this anymore. Hating you hasn't brought him back. It's only made me smaller." They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But they stood there long enough to understand that grief doesn't always end in reconciliation, but sometimes it ends in understanding. When Riley walked away, Anna whispered under her breath, "I loved him, and I still do." In the quiet apartment above the bakery, Anna Vega lights a candle every evening, plays one song for herself. Sometimes she leaves the window open, and if a child walking by happens to hear and looks up, they say, "Miss Anna's playing again." No one asks about the past anymore. And for the first time in years, she doesn't dream of it either. She simply sleeps,